The sound of my name echoed through the hall, slightly mispronounced, but still mine. I walked across the stage, heels clicking against polished floors, under the filtered light that bounced off glassy floral centerpieces and rows of velvet-draped chairs. A chorus of polite applause followed, measured, almost obligatory. That was fine. I hadn't come here for their noise. I came here to finally be seen. Out of the corner of my eye, I spotted them. My parents, rushing in, slightly out of breath. Deacon, my older brother, waved as if he were the one graduating. Their outfits, deep navy with hints of silver, coordinated perfectly. I wasn't told. I was the centerpiece today, yet somehow I clashed with the backdrop of my own story. I adjusted my cap slightly, scanning their faces for something, approval, pride, anything warm. But they were already settling in, checking programs, whispering. A hollow kind of ache settled inside me, the kind you don't really feel until it's too loud to ignore. I had spent years building this moment. Not for applause, not for pictures. Just for presence. Their presence. To finally not be invisible. And yet, here I was again. If success means being invisible in your own story, what's the point of winning? The reception after the ceremony was held in the adjoining hall, where the scent of catered food mixed with laughter and clinking glasses. I stood near a table stacked with petite fours, a glass of something fizzy in hand, making small talk with professors who barely remembered my name. Then someone tapped a glass with a spoon. That sound, like the opening bell of a boxing match. "Let's hear from Deacon Kerr," someone announced. Big brother of our graduate and one of our town's rising stars at Torrin Enterprises. I froze. Deacon grinned, straightening his tie as if the spotlight was his birthright. "Thanks, everyone," he started, casually confident. "Adraya's always been the dreamer of the family," he said, smiling wide. "Every family needs one of those, even if it doesn't exactly pay the bills." Laughter bubbled around us. Thin, sharp. It cut more because no one realized it was a blade. I stood frozen in the blur of claps and chuckles, each one landing like a slap. My mother gave a rehearsed chuckle. "He's just teasing," she murmured near my shoulder. I didn't look at her. Then, from the corner, his boss stepped forward. Mr. Torrin, sleek suit, heavy presence, the kind of man who looked like he knew what everything cost, including people. He tilted his head. "Funny," he said slowly, "I was just telling Deacon that dreamers are usually the ones who build things worth remembering." Silence. A beat passed. Another. The air shifted. Politeness cracked. I looked up. He was watching me, not as Deacon's sister, not as an afterthought, but directly. Fully. The nod he gave me wasn't big, but it felt massive. Recognition, in its purest form. And in that moment, I realized how starved I had been for it. Validation from a stranger shouldn't matter this much. But when your family never gives it, it feels like oxygen. Deacon blinked, smiled, recovered with a laugh. "Well, I guess we're a full-service family, then. One builds dreams, the other sells them." Another joke. Another deflection. The night dragged on, glazed in conversations that floated above my head. I nodded when spoken to. Smiled when expected. But inside, I wasn't there anymore. Deacon kept joking, louder now, defensive. My father pretended to be busy with a cheese plate. My mother leaned in again, voice low and urgent. "You could have laughed," she said. "Made it easier for him." I turned to her. Why'd I always have to make it easier for everyone else? Her mouth opened, then shut. She looked away. That silence, it was louder than anything Deacon had said. I left early. The hallway outside the reception was lined with photos of graduates. I walked past them slowly, until I found mine, tilted slightly off-center. Of course it was. I reached out, straightened it. Stared at my own face. That night, I stopped waiting for applause from people who never meant to clap. As I stepped into the cool night air, I heard Deacon's voice behind me, still laughing, as if he hadn't just buried me with a smile. I woke up before the sun had the nerve to climb over the trees. My back stiff from a mattress that had always been too soft. The air in this house hadn't changed, it still smelled like wood polish, reheated coffee, and the past trying too hard to seem pleasant. This house was a museum of contradictions. Picture frames still leaned slightly off-level in the hallway, never fixed. The dent in the wall behind the bathroom door, the one from when it, accidentally, Slammed during an argument, still there, painted over but not repaired. And the silence? That was the loudest part of it all. Downstairs, the kitchen murmured with the sound of clinking china. My father stood at the counter, pouring his third cup of burnt coffee, eyes locked on the newspaper like it held national secrets. He didn't look up when I entered. My mother, already in motion, laid out plates with mechanical precision. She smiled, that brittle, empty kind of smile you give to strangers who've overstayed their welcome. "Morning," I offered, voice soft. "You're a guest," she said, as if that explained everything. Let Deacon do something for once. But Deacon wasn't there, wasn't even awake, and it hit me, again, that this wasn't my house anymore. Maybe it never really had been. We sat down to breakfast like actors on a tired stage, the air filled with small talk and forced bites. Then, like clockwork, the barbs began, disguised as memories. "Remember when you dropped out of your first college?" My mother said between sips of tea, as if asking about the weather. "I didn't drop out," I replied, evenly. "I transferred. I worked full-time and finished my degree." She shrugged. "Same difference." My father chuckled under his breath. "You always had a flair for making simple things complicated." I swallowed hard. "No, I just didn't have the luxury of being carried." More stories followed. The time I forgot a birthday party. How I cried too loud when the dog died. I listened as they rewrote our history in real time, smoothing over their parts, sharpening mine. It's hard to argue with people who've rehearsed a different version of your life. Harder still when they look you in the eye while doing it. After clearing the plates, my father leaned back in his chair and said it like he was asking about the weather. "Since you've graduated now, you'll finally be able to repay that loan we co-signed." My fork froze midair. "What loan?" I asked carefully. "The student one," he replied, annoyed at my confusion. "The one we helped you with before you left." "That wasn't mine," I said slowly. "That was Deacon's. It was in my name, but—" "Don't start," he snapped. "We gave you everything. A roof, food, school. Now it's time you step up." My mind shot back to the day I'd found out. I was halfway through my first semester when a notice came from a loan agency I didn't recognize. Deacon had signed the forms. They said it was just a formality. Just paperwork, my mother had told me. Family helps family. But now it wasn't help. Now it was debt. And silence wasn't protecting me, it was chaining me. I stood up from the table. "Excuse me." I stepped out back, into the yard. The grass was overgrown, and the old patio chairs rusted at the legs. But the fig tree was still there, barely standing, brittle at the edges. I'd planted it with Grandma Ruth when I was 8. She said it would take years to bear fruit but was worth the wait. Just because something's growing doesn't mean it's thriving. I sat on the edge of the porch and pulled out my phone. Scrolled through old emails, downloaded student loan records, took screenshots, organized. Pain was still there, but something colder moved in behind it. Focus. Inside, laughter drifted from the living room. I stood quietly, edging toward the hallway. That's when I heard his voice. "Deacon." On the phone. "She won't say anything. She never does." My hands tightened around my phone. This time I just might. I returned to my apartment just after the sun started losing its fight with the clouds. The blinds were partially closed, so the room was half lit and quiet, too quiet. My sanctuary felt different now. I set my bag down, glanced at the little dent in the wall by the couch, and realized this space had carried more memory than comfort. I poured coffee, hands steady but the nerves beneath buzzing. My father's words hung in the air, "We gave you everything." They echoed, pregnant with accusation. I sat at my desk and opened the laptop, the screen bright against the gloom. Emails, bank statements, downloaded files. I took a slow breath. I found the loan form, signed in my name though I had been abroad that semester. Then another document. My signature looked like someone traced it with a shaky hand. I held it up to my phone's flashlight, scanning the slanted strokes. They didn't match. It wasn't paranoia if the evidence fit too perfectly. My phone buzzed. Before I called the loan office, "Deacon." I glanced at the caller ID and took a deep breath. His voice came soft at first. "You made quite a scene this morning." I answered calmly. I didn't say a word. He chuckled. "You always think silence makes you noble. It just makes you forgettable." I kept quiet. I heard muffled laughter, Deacon on speaker, someone else joining in. Probably Dad. The smile in their voices made me sick. I hung up. Decisive. Then the laptop pinged. An email from an unknown address, no message, just an audio file titled "You Should Know." I hesitated, half of me expected it to be spam. But I played it. My father's low voice. She'll never question it. She's too grateful. Deacon. And too scared to lose what little we give her. Silence. Then a faint click. My heart hammered. My sanctuary felt hollow. I sat back, feeling the weight of every valid year I invested into earning respect, eroding. I realized someone in my house had taped this. My eyes flicked to the door, to the window. Mom, Dad, Deacon, they think they own the script. They don't know I can read it now. And then the voice behind them, she's smarter than you think. My mother's voice. Shock. Confusion. A spark. It flickered like a small flame in a closed room. Maybe I wasn't the only one suffocating here. Maybe someone else had watched for years. I closed the laptop. Rain tapped the window. The city lights blurred. In that moment I realized I didn't just want recognition, I wanted freedom. I returned to the house that once felt like mine but stopped being mine the day I left for college. The morning sky was overcast, and that familiar weight settled on me, keys in hand, stepping through the front door still bearing the same dent from a slammed argument years ago. I looked up to the attic direction, the old stairs inviting me to dig into whatever truth was waiting above. My mother stood at the bottom of the staircase, surprised but controlled. She offered me a tight smile as if noticing a guest in her own home. I told her I wanted to look through old photo albums, any pretense to avoid suspicion. She nodded and turned back, leaving silence hanging in the air like a fragrance I didn't want to inhale. The attic creaked beneath my feet. Boxes labeled, taxes, church, school, stacked in dusty corners. I moved them aside with trembling hands until I found a smaller box, with Private 2005, scribbled in black marker. Inside were packets of receipts, faded folders, a legal folder titled Kerr & Sons Investments, Legal. My pulse spiked as I read line after line. My social security number used in a secondary loan, one I had never signed. My name listed as silent partner, though I never knew of any such partnership. I read the notarized statement. Any disputes will be handled privately among signatories. The words felt like a trap sprung long ago. I leaned against a trunk, heart beating in my throat. I knew this family's power structure, but I realized now I also understood its architecture. My phone buzzed. A simple message from Saul. You okay? I stared at the screen, then slipped back to the documents. There, tucked between album pages, I found a folded notarized statement in my father's stack. Andrea Kerr, fully aware and supportive. But the signature was wrong. Not my handwriting. It happened when I was 19, signed, scholarship paperwork, half asleep, needing to get to class. I remembered the phrase they used, family helps family. I smile inwardly now at its cost. I whispered to myself, it wasn't trust. It was control. I climbed down and found my mother silent in the hallway. Her eyes weren't angry, just tired. I handed her the paper. She took it, looked at the signature, then away. You always thought I didn't know, she finally said. But I knew. I just didn't know how to stop it. My throat tight. Why record it, then? I asked. She exhaled slowly. Because you weren't supposed to be the one sacrificed. I closed my eyes as the truth folded over me. Guilt and clarity coiled into something heavy. I let both sit. I headed for the door but paused by my father's old home office. A drawer was slightly ajar. Maybe I didn't open it. Maybe it invited me. I pulled it open and found a flash drive labeled Deacon, Contingency. I tucked it into my jacket without thinking. Outside, rain began tapping the roof. The truth doesn't come gift-wrapped. Sometimes it comes with a warning. The church hall was warm with sunlight that managed to sneak through the high windows, even though the day outside was overcast. I walked in behind my family, feeling like a prop in a photo scene they'd rehearsed too many times. My father's tie glinted under the lights, Deacon's smile polished and practiced, and my mother carried a tray of drinks like she carried the burden of keeping peace. I kept my head straight, shoulders set. I had a seat but I didn't feel entitled to it. Because I knew they wanted me silent. They greeted people. They hugged and smiled. "So nice to have your daughter back on her feet," one woman said, her tone smooth as satin. I lifted my chin. "Some of us were never off our feet, just not in your spotlight," I said quietly. The plate of hors d'oeuvres shifted in her hand. I wasn't there to be polite. The pastor called the congregation to attention, welcomed us, and introduced Deacon for a special recognition. He stood next to a pillar with a banner behind him. The sponsor's name hovered in small print on the banner, a shell corporation I had found hidden in the attic documents. My chest tightened. My mind raced. I asked for the floor. The room quieted. I took a breath. I kept it simple and raw. I've been told faith is about truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Sometimes we don't realize the wolves aren't strangers, they're just wearing ties at our dinner table. Another hush. My father's jaw clenched. Deacon's smile froze. My mother's gaze dropped to her shoes. I knew I had scored the first hit. Afterward, Deacon found me tucked away in the hallway. Right out of a script he didn't realize I was reading. "That stunt could cost you," he hissed, hand clenched on a coat rack. "You want to threaten me? Make sure you don't bring a paper trail to a fire," I said, slipping the folder of documents I'd found into his hand. It landed with a muted thump. His face turned brittle. "Keep pushing and I'll sue. I'll say you broke in, stole private files." I stared at him. "You should be more worried about what's on the flash drive bearing your name." His eyes widened. Confirmation. Back in the parking lot, the sky shifted to gray. I sat in my car, engine off, tears threatening but suppressed. They weren't for fear, there was no fear left. They were for the years I had spent holding my tongue. They were for the voice I finally found. I remembered high school hallways, teachers telling me, "Don't make waves." And how I believed staying quiet was safe. Maybe grace became a synonym for being small. I said to myself, the loudest noise I ever made was telling the truth with no apology. My phone buzzed. A voicemail. From Saul's boss, Mr. Garrison. A calm voice. "I heard your little testimony today. Let's talk." My chest thumped. I didn't know if this was an opportunity or a trap. But either way, it meant someone was listening. When I stepped into my loft that evening, the city lights flickered across the wet streets below, each reflection like a reminder of the choices I couldn't take back. The rain hadn't stopped since afternoon. It hit the windows in steady rhythm, like a warning too soft to hear. I set the old box from the attic on my dining table and pulled out everything I'd gathered: forged documents, loan statements, even the diploma I'd worked years for but never really owned. My fingers traced the embossed letters of my name. The paper was worth nothing, but the truth it carried was priceless. I laid it beside the flash drive. Every lie had a paper trail. Mine was just waiting to be read. I remembered something Maya Angelou once said: "There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you." I whispered into the empty room, "Then tonight, I speak." The phone buzzed, breaking the silence. Deacon's name lit up the screen. I answered. His voice was tight, controlled, like someone gripping glass that could shatter at any second. "You're crossing a line, Andrea." I breathed slow, steady. That line was crossed on me long ago. I'm just drawing one now. Before he could respond, I opened my laptop, hit play on the recording. My father's voice poured through the speaker, calm and cold. "She'll never question it. She's too grateful." Silence followed. I could almost hear Deacon swallow on the other end. How did you get that?" he stammered. I didn't answer that. I didn't need to. "What do you want?" he finally asked. "What's fair?" I said, "and for once, what's mine?" His breathing grew sharp. "You think you can scare me?" he hissed. "No," I said, voice low, even. "You already did. That's why this call isn't about fear anymore." I ended it. His name blinked again, and again, unanswered. The rain outside grew harder, like applause from the dark. I moved to the window, the skyline reflecting back my own shape, small but steady. My hands hovered over the keyboard as I drafted an email addressed to the board of his company and to my father. The subject line read, "Unauthorized use of assets." I attached everything: scans of the forged documents, screenshots of transactions, and one line in bold: "Power concedes nothing without a demand." I hit send. For a moment, my pulse raced so fast I thought the floor might move beneath me. The message left my outbox. Minutes later, a ping, received. Another, an investor from out of town replied, We'll talk tomorrow. The words carried weight. It wasn't triumph I felt, it was equilibrium. I wasn't climbing anymore. I was standing where they never wanted me to stand. By the time the rain slowed, I had turned off every light except one by the couch. I leaned the diploma against the wall, still damp from where I'd held it. As I walked toward the kitchen, something shifted in the glass door's reflection. A shadow. I turned quickly. The hallway outside was empty, but the door was cracked open, wind whispering through it. I closed it, locked it, breathed out once. My phone buzzed again, an unfamiliar name on the screen. Torren Spurlock. Meeting scheduled. Monday, 9 a.m. The same man who once looked at me like I was worth hearing. I stood in the middle of the room, rainwater dripping from the edge of my coat. I asked for recognition, I murmured. I got momentum instead. I walked into the cafe after another long day at the firm, the briefcase heavier than usual, not because of the case files, but because it held the flash drive labeled Deacon, Contingency. The soft hum of the espresso machine and the late-hour hush felt like a safe space. I spotted Junia at our usual corner table, her eyes tired but firm. She slid an envelope toward me without a word. I opened it and stared at photographs. The company newsletter with Deacon standing proud in front of the building I designed. My hands clenched the edge of the table. I read the headline, Her Excellence, Deacon leads expansion. I glanced up at Junia. She didn't flinch, she'd seen it coming. I thought of Shirley Chisholm's words, if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. I opened my briefcase and placed a folding chair across from her. My pulse jumped. I knew the turning point had arrived. This was no longer about being polite. This was about being seen. The cafe lights flickered as I made my decision. The next day I walked into the boardroom at Deacon's firm. The decor was sterile, corporate, yet familiar, glass walls, black leather chairs, soft murmurs. As I entered, all conversation paused. I laid the documents on the table. The signed agreement that bore my name, the project file I created, the newsletter with Deacon's face all over it. The CEO, Mr. Torren Spurlock, leaned forward and asked quietly, Miss Kerr, care to explain? I didn't blink. I said, here's the truth you never asked for. I inserted the flash drive and played the recording of Dad's voice admitting I was the silent partner. The room went cold. Whispers stopped. Deacon stuttered, unable to compose a grin. Board members shifted in their seats. I continued, no more background roles. I built this. The question now is, who will pay attention? I stood up slowly. The only empty seat in the room was the one I brought. I stepped out, leaving silence trailing behind me. That night at home the phone rang. My mother's voice on the line. You're making this personal, Adrea. Think about our family name. She sounded calm. Too calm. I replied, I already did. That's why I'm separating my name from this. I saw the press release flash in my hand a moment later. The company announced a data breach. The flash drive I showed? Labeled, unverified. My face in the company photo, cropped. My credit line, gone. Deacon posted a new image, our next legacy project. He used the building I designed, his tagline glowing under the photo. I sat back, lights low. This wasn't just about being visible, it was about refusing to vanish. I whispered, the blade they sharpened for me now turns both ways. Then a message lit up my phone. From Aunt Odessa. Meet me in Amarillo. Bring everything. My heart thumped. Why now? Why her? I locked the folder containing the diploma and flash drive into my bag. I thought quietly. When you draw your line, be ready for someone to cross it. I left the apartment, night air cool on my face. Rain had returned. I didn't mind. The storm inside me matched it. The invitation came under a glossy envelope and felt more like a threat than a welcome. My name was printed beneath Deacon's, at the gala for Kerr & Sons, the company my father built, the building I designed, but the name I never claimed. When I read the address I recognized the rooftop terrace of that glass tower, one I helped create yet never saw my credit on. I dressed quietly, a black suit, and headed into the evening sky. The elevator drifted upward, lights dimming as the city stretched below. I remembered my mother's words. We invested in your brother because he would carry the name forward. I felt the chill that night. At the doors to the terrace, Deacon clinked a glass in laughter, his arm around my father. Investors nodded at me politely. Chairs sat empty around high tables. I paused, gripping the envelope. I whispered under my breath, "They brought me here to pose. I'm staying to expose." The speeches began after supper, wine, and applause. I waited, eyes wandering to the building behind us, its facade the one I drafted. Then I stepped forward to the microphone. I held up the ledger I'd carried in my bag, the document listing every investment and contributor, except me. "Good evening," I said, voice steady. The murmurs faded. I cleared my throat. "I'd like to introduce the invisible partner in tonight's venture." A dead silence settled. Me. Behind me, the screen lit up with images, blueprints I drew, meetings I led, contracts I signed. Then the captions, Deacon Kerr, project lead. After the crowd shifted, I quoted Maya Angelou, "There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you." I held the ledger high. For years I worked behind the scenes designing this building, securing the loans, meeting with city officials, then watched the narrative erase me. If trust is a building, what happens when the foundation doesn't include you? I let the question hang. My father's glass inhaled air. Deacon's face went gray. Investors' eyes darted. The power I knew was crumbling. The projector slid to a new screen, an official company statement flashed. Unauthorized disclosure of confidential information by Ms. Andrea Kerr. The music died. Phones lifted. The crowd turned. Deacon smirked. My father froze. My mother's smile faded. I held the diploma, the flash drive, the ledger, all in view. "Look closer," I said. "Look at who's built the image, and who's built the structure." I walked off the stage. No applause. Just silence and stares. They thought they were about to humiliate me. Instead, they revealed what they tried to hide. I thought quietly. They tried to cancel me in front of everyone, but they signed the receipt first. When the last guest left the terrace, the night sky had replaced the evening light. I walked through the lobby alone, the glass walls reflecting city lights and my reflection side by side. My phone buzzed. "Torrin Spurlock, meet me tomorrow morning. We start clean." I looked up at the tower I designed, its reflection casting long lines into the city. For the first time I didn't feel like a copy or a shadow. I felt like someone walking away from the frame toward her own picture. "They drew the lines tonight," I whispered. I crossed them with my own hands. The city was still waking up when I parked outside Torrin's office. The rain had been falling since dawn, thin and steady, tracing soft lines down the windows. I sat for a moment, watching the steam rise from my coffee cup, breathing in the quiet that comes before something changes. The lobby lights flickered on as I stepped inside. The receptionist waved me through without asking a name. She already knew who I was there to see. When I walked into Torrin's office, the view of the bay stretched wide behind him, gray water rolling beneath the mist. He stood, smiled in that calm way he does, and pointed to a folder on his desk. "Reclamation Project," the label read. I opened it, slowly, feeling the weight of every year I'd spent unseen press down and then lift like a tide going out. Inside was an offer, my name printed beside his, a partnership, an ownership stake. Recognition written in ink. "This isn't charity," Torrin said. "It's overdue." I ran my finger across my name, the letters finally where they belonged. Justice, I thought, doesn't always roar, it signs its name quietly. I signed the paper, but before I handed it back, I said, "Add one line. My name stays above the fold. Always." Torrin didn't hesitate. "It will." The door opened behind me. Deacon walked in like someone who hadn't decided whether to apologize or defend himself. His shoulders squared, his eyes uncertain. For once, I didn't feel that rush of anger I used to. Only distance. The kind that comes after a wound's already scarred over. "You could have ruined me," he said. I turned toward him. "I didn't have to," I said evenly. "You did that the day you forgot where you came from." His eyes darted toward the contract on the table. He knew what it meant, that his place was gone. His lips tightened. "So, this is how it ends." I looked at him, and for a second, I saw the boy who once handed me my first drafting pencil, not the man who'd erased my name from my own work. "It ends the way you wrote it," I said. "Actions have signatures too." He nodded slowly, looked down, and muttered, "Maybe I deserved this." I didn't blink. "You did." As he turned to leave, I said the last thing I'd ever need to say to him. "Carrying the family name means nothing if you drop the values." The door shut softly behind him, and it felt final, not cruel, just true. 3 days later, the company released a public statement. It carried my name in bold, Andrea Kerr, lead architect and partner. No shared credit, no revision. Just truth on record. Photos of the building I designed flooded social media, the steel and glass catching sunlight the way I once imagined it would. Someone captioned it, "From silence to structure." The phrase stuck. Strangers filled the comments. Finally. Justice served. Took them long enough. I read a few, then stopped. I didn't need validation from people who'd never met me. I needed peace. A reporter from the local paper reached out. During the interview, she asked, "Do you forgive them?" I smiled, quiet but sure. "Forgiveness isn't approval," I said. "It's just letting go of the anchor you tied to yourself." She paused, scribbled something, then asked, "What's next?" I looked past her, toward the window. "Build something that lasts." The words came easy because they were finally mine. That evening, I came home to the apartment that had seen every version of me, hopeful, broken, rebuilding. The rain had stopped, leaving the air clean, almost new. On the shelf sat my old diploma. I hadn't touched it since graduation. The corner still held a faint smudge from Deacon's fingerprint, the day he'd grabbed it and said, "You'll outgrow all this someday." I'd kept it tucked away, thinking it represented what I hadn't achieved. But now, it felt different. I took it in my hands, smoothed the paper, and set it in a frame. Not as proof of worth. Just as a reminder. No one gives you validation. You claim it. I hung it above my desk, next to a blank sheet of tracing paper with my new project name at the top, Kerr Design Collective. My name first. Always. I stood by the window, looking out at the skyline. The bay shimmered under a pale light breaking through the clouds. For the first time, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like someone trying to prove herself. I just felt ready. I thought of my parents, my brother, all the noise that once defined me. And I whispered, to no one in particular but maybe to everyone listening, sometimes, the people who bury you forget that you're a seed. I smiled, because the truth of it had grown roots in me. The past was still there, but I'd moved beyond it, quietly, completely, like the rain finally letting go.